guys, welcome back to my channel. My name is Maddie and today I'm going to be giving you my July wrap up. Before I get into this video, I just want to say I'm sorry for being so inconsistent with my posting, and my schedule is just all out of whack because my sister and my 5-year-old nephew moved in with us unexpectedly, but there's just like so much noise in the house all the time and I'm not able to film when I am available to film. So it's been very difficult trying to find little time slots to be able to actually film. So I'm just having to do it whenever I can. So I apologize if my videos are scattered all over the place. So I read a total of 11 books this month. I read 1 nonfiction, 1 poetry book, 2 comics, 1 graphic novel, 1 YA fantasy, 2 adult fantasy magical realism, 1 adult horror, 1 YA contemporary, and 1 classic. And now without further ado, let's get on into the books that I read in the month of July. First, I read Uninvited by Lisa Kerturst. This is a Christian nonfiction book written towards people who are feeling lonely and left out, and this is about them gaining confidence and feeling loved in a world that makes them feel unloved. This one was just okay for me, but I did like the message that it sent across, but at the same time, I just didn't really connect with it. It was one of those books that I just finished just to finish. So I actually didn't feel comfortable giving this one a rating. But if it sounds like something that you'd be interested in, definitely check it out. I know this book has helped a lot of people, so this one may be for you. Next, I read The Next Person You Meet in Heaven by Mitch Albom. And this is the sequel to The 5 People You Meet in Heaven. I had to read that book when I was in high school, and I really liked it, and I didn't think that I would enjoy it. 1, because I was in high school and it was a required reading, but 2, it just also didn't sound like a book that I would enjoy. This book is basically just what the author's construct of heaven is for him, you know, like it's not like a biblical heaven, if that makes sense. The book is so much more beyond that, but anyway, I did read the sequel because I did enjoy the first book, and I enjoyed the sequel. I didn't think it was nearly as good as the first book. The first book was definitely a lot more quirky and interesting. This one was not boring, but it just wasn't as interesting. The first book is set in a carnival with all these like circus carnival characters, which I really enjoyed that about the first book. The second book doesn't have anything like that. It was just less interesting, which is why I only gave it 4 stars. Next, I read Traitor to the Throne by Alwyn Hamilton. This is book 2 to the Rebel of the Sands trilogy. I loved Rebel of the Sands earlier this year, and I am so glad I continue on with this series because I really enjoyed the second book as well. I actually read this book for the Book Junkie trials. This book fulfilled the first prompt for my team, which was to read a political or like war-themed book. This is a YA fantasy set in like this fictional Arabian style world. It's really interesting because this fantasy world is a blend of like the US Western world and Middle Eastern desert and Arabian culture. It's really interesting and fun, and I love the main characters. This book has a huge group of fantastic characters. It basically follows this group of rebels as they try to overthrow the throne, and many of them are also hunted down because they are half genie and they are wanted for the magical powers that they possess. I really love this series, and I gave this second book 5 out of 5 stars. Next, I read Bird Box by Josh Malerman, and this is an adult horror novel which I read to complete the second prompt for the Book Junkie trials, which was to read a horror book. I have been wanting to read this one so that I could watch the film adaptation on Netflix, and let me say, it did not disappoint. It wasn't as spooky as I was expecting, but it was still really interesting, and that's one thing that I felt like the movie adaptation did better than the book. Basically, there's like this evil presence, and when people encounter this presence, they kill others and they kill themselves. It's very gory, very horrific, and I felt like the movie really brought this element of the story to life. The movie kind of upped the stakes a little bit, which I did enjoy, but we're not here to talk about the movie, we're here to talk about the book. I did enjoy the book, and I gave it a 4 out of 5 star rating. Okay, next I read 2 comic books. My library does not have a good selection of comics or graphic novels, so there's just random books here and there, and I just kind of grabbed them all. First, I read Guardians of the Galaxy Tomorrow's Avengers Book 1. I didn't feel like I could give this a rating because it was my first comic book ever. Although now that I have read a few others, I can say that I enjoyed this one more so than some of these others. Next, I read Guardians of the Galaxy, Galaxy's Most Wanted. And this one specifically follows Groot and Rocket. It was really fun. I enjoyed Rocket's sense of humor. But I will say Rocket has a darker personality than he does in the movie. But in the comics, he's like got like red beady eyes and he's kind of like evil. So that kind of threw me off a little bit, but I did enjoy this one. This one's probably my favorite that I've read so far. Next, I read The Timekeeper by Mitch Albom, and wow, must I say, this book very much surprised me. I had no idea what this book was really about, and basically it's an origin story for the Father of Time. This book follows the 3 characters and is set in 2 different times. It follows a man during the ancient biblical Tower of Babel times, and a teenage girl in modern time, and an old man in modern time. I don't want to say much more because I feel like it'll ruin the story for you, but I just really enjoyed this one. I really love the themes of this story and the messages that it sent across. I enjoyed this one much more than I thought I would, and I gave it 5 out of 5 stars. Next, I read The City of Ember graphic novel, and it's by Jean Duprat. This story was not originally told in graphic novel form. It was originally a novel, but I saw it in graphic novel, and I want to read more graphic novels in my library. It has like none, but I found this one on the shelves and I was like, why not? I have no idea what it's about, but it's a graphic novel, so I'm gonna get it. This was a really interesting story. Basically, it follows these 2 kids in this world where the light and electricity and everything is dying out. All these people have ever known is the city that they live in, and they don't realize that there might be an outside world that can save them. They're running out of electricity, they're running out of food and supplies, and so these 2 kids embark on a journey to see what else is out there in the world and to save their city. I thought this was a very cute story and I really enjoyed it. I gave it 5 out of 5 stars. Next, I read The Sweetest Kind of Poison by Katie Wismer. This is a poetry collection following Katie's abusive relationship that she was in high school and how she recovered from that and grew as a person and who she is now. I really like this, and of course I love supporting other booktubers, so if you haven't checked out The Sweetest Kind of Poison, you should definitely go and purchase a copy and support Katie. I really enjoyed her book and I gave it 5 out of 5 stars. Next, I read This Song Will Save Your Life by Leela Sales, and I loved this book. I loved this book so much. This is a YA contemporary story following a girl who has depression, trigger warnings for depression and suicide. The main character is very lonely, very depressed, but then by chance she discovers this underground dance club and falls in love with DJing and finds happiness in this whole new life in the world of DJing and clubbing. I really liked this book and I gave it 5 out of 5 stars. I also read this for prompt 3 of the Book Junkie Trials. Next, I read A Tale of Two Cities by Charles Dickens. This is of course a classic, and this is a romance story set in the French Revolution. I will say that this book was very confusing and hard to follow because it just jumped in different points of time and there was like nothing to bridge them. It was just like, oh, the main character's a teenager and this happens. 5 months later, here's a random scene of this happening. 5 years later, here's a random scene of this happening, and I was just very confused and it was hard to keep up with all the characters. And to be honest, even after finishing this book, I still wasn't really sure at what happened with anything in this story. So I watched a movie adaptation and everything clicked and made sense to me in my head. It took watching the movie for me to understand and like this book, if that makes any sense, because I really just didn't understand it. I read this one to complete prompt 4 for the Book Junkie Trials, which was to read an intimidating book, and this was definitely intimidating. I put off reading this book for several years. And that was all the books that I read in the month of July, and I will say for the Book Junkie Trials, I was supposed to read the group book, which was Stardust by Neil Gaiman, and my team had the ability to DNF a book, and I definitely DNF'd that book, not because it was bad, but I just wasn't into it. I may try and pick it up at a later date. I had no interest in reading that book to begin with, and I made it maybe like a fourth of the way through, and I just wasn't even paying attention anymore. I didn't really care about the story at all. So I just DNF'd it. But I still completed the Book Junkie Trials because I was able to DNF that book and it still counted towards my points. Anyway, that's it for this video today. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up and subscribe to my channel if you want to see more bookish content by me. I hope y'all have a wonderful day and I will see you in my next video. Bye.